What if I told you that alchemy was never about turning lead into gold, but instead about awakening a hidden power within you, a power that lies dormant and can only be activated when you access certain forgotten truths? Truths that the ancient Hermetic masters encoded in teachings that have survived for millennia, hidden in manuscripts, sealed by symbols, ignored by the masses, but accessible to those who are ready. In this video, you're going to discover the 15 deepest lessons of spiritual alchemy. Lessons not meant to entertain you, but to transform you. You're going to understand why your soul is the true artisan of reality. You'll realize how everything in the universe is interconnected through an invisible web of correspondence and vibration. You'll learn how to silence the internal noise, travel through the 8 heavens of consciousness, understand your true triple nature, and rediscover the creative power that lives in your own word. But that's not all. You'll also see how wisdom heals old wounds, how intuition becomes a trustworthy guide, how the purification of the senses allows you to see the invisible, and in the end, you'll uncover the most powerful lesson of all, the alchemy of love, the force that unites, transforms, and reconnects you with the all. If you feel like the time has come to awaken your cosmic power, stay with me till the end, because each of these lessons will ignite a sacred memory within you. And once that memory is activated, there's no going back. Because truth, once seen, can never be unseen. Lesson 1. The soul as the artisan of reality. Most people believe their life is shaped by external circumstances, that it's the environment, luck, chance, or fate that determines what happens. But the truth is something else, and it's much deeper than you've been led to believe. In the Hermetic tradition, taught by masters like Hermes Trismegistus and preserved in the manuscripts of the Corpus Hermeticum, reality isn't something that happens to you. It's something that happens through you. And at the center of this creative power is your soul. The soul, in the Hermetic view, is not some vague entity or distant philosophical concept. It is the vital force that animates everything you are. It doesn't just live in the body, but it commands it, shapes it, uses it as a tool. While the body is born and dies, while the mind changes with time, the soul remains. Immortal, untouchable, divine. It is the soul that generates your deepest thoughts, the feelings that come from a place you can't explain. It's the soul that draws in the encounters that change your life, the synchronicities that feel like magic, the reactions that emerge before your mind even has time to think. When you feel that silent calling inside you, that certainty that you need to change, that you were born for something greater, that's your soul speaking. The ancient alchemists used to say, the soul is the hidden artisan of destiny. That means that everything that manifests around you, relationships, opportunities, crises, healing, has an invisible origin within you. The soul doesn't just take part in the creation of reality, it is the creator. And the more disconnected you live from it, the more your life feels chaotic, meaningless, out of control. Have you ever wondered why you repeat the same patterns even when you want something different? Why you feel empty even when you have everything you were told you should want? It's because you're trying to create reality from the mind, the ego, the surface. But true creation only happens when you return to the soul. And this isn't vague mysticism. It's a forgotten key of true spirituality. The soul emits a unique vibration. That vibration communicates with the invisible field that governs the universe. It's like a frequency, and everything that resonates with it begins to align. That's why, when you begin to heal your soul, not with dogmas, but with truth, you realize that life around you starts to change. People leave. New paths appear. the soul starts shaping the external scenery to reflect what's happening inside. And this isn't something you force. It happens naturally, like a mirror, starting to reflect the real light coming from within. But here's the thing. The soul isn't interested in comfort, stability, or control. It's interested in expansion. It will pull you out of routines, break your comfort zones, provoke crises, force you to face what's been hidden, because that's how it shapes a new reality. Not an illusory reality based on what others expect from you, but an authentic, vibrant, true one. The soul is the spark of the all within you, and when you align with it, the universe responds. Because the universe recognizes the soul, not the mask. Reality begins to reorganize when you stop identifying solely with the body, the name, the titles, and start living from your essence. It doesn't matter what's happened so far. The soul isn't tainted by the mistakes of the past. It remains intact. It carries no guilt, only learning. It doesn't want perfection. It wants presence. It doesn't demand strength. It wants truth. And the more you live from that soul, the more you remember who you are. And who you are is exactly who the universe needs you to be in order to create a new reality. Lesson 2. The unity of the all. And it's in this state of alignment with the soul that another truth begins to reveal itself. A truth that ordinary eyes can't see, but your consciousness starts to feel. Nothing in the universe is separate. Nothing exists on its own, in isolation. Everything is woven together in an invisible network of meanings, vibrations, and correspondences. And this truth has a name: unity. The ancients called this the law of correspondence. As above, so below. As within, so without. It's not just a poetic phrase. It's an accurate description of how reality functions at its most subtle level. When you understand this, you stop seeing the world as a sequence of disconnected coincidences. You start noticing patterns. You begin to see that everything communicates, that the microcosm reflects the macrocosm, that what happens inside you echoes out into the world. Look up at the sky and watch the planets move. They don't spin at random. They follow rhythms, cycles, perfect proportions. Now look inside your body, your heartbeat, your breath, synapses, hormonal tides. There's a dance happening there too. An intelligence at work both in the cosmos and in your nervous system. The same principle that moves galaxies pulses within your cells. That's not a metaphor, that's a fact. And this connection isn't abstract, it's alive. That's why certain thoughts make you sick. That's why heavy environments make you feel weighed down. That's why sometimes you walk into a place and feel like it's not yours. Because everything vibrates. Everything communicates. The universe responds to the vibration you emit, not the words you say. And when your vibration falls out of sync with the all, you feel it. In your body, in your mind, in the things that happen around you. Nothing is random. When a leaf falls from a tree, it's not just falling, it's being called by the earth. When an animal senses danger before it even happens, it's responding to signals that science still can't explain. But the ancients understood thousands of years ago. They knew everything that exists is part of a single living organism. And that the human being is not the top of creation. We're just one cell in this vast body called the cosmos. And that's why we get sick when we live as if we're alone. As if what we do has no consequences. As if our thoughts don't touch the field around us. But they do. The way you treat people shifts the energy of your home. The words you speak shape the reality of your relationships. The feelings you carry create waves that travel through time and space. Quantum physics is starting to catch up. Entangled particles, non-local influences, systems that collapse under observation. But the Hermetic masters knew this without microscopes. They knew because they felt. They knew because they lived connected to the source. When you recognize that you are within the all, everything changes. The ego steps back, guilt dissolves, comparison stops making sense. Because you understand that the other is also you, that their mistakes carry something of your own, that the world is constantly reflecting back what still needs to be seen, acknowledged, healed, not as punishment, but as a reminder that everything is one flow, and you're not here to separate, you're here to remember. Lesson 3. The importance of inner silence. And when you begin to realize that everything is connected, that nothing happens outside the great universal organism, an inevitable question arises. How do you listen to the all? How do you communicate with this cosmic intelligence that flows through you? The answer isn't in more information or ready-made formulas. It lies in something modern society fears: silence. Because true silence isn't the absence of sound, it's the absence of inner noise. It's that state where you stop reacting automatically, stop compulsively searching, stop filling every space with distractions. It's when you quiet yourself inside and begin to hear what truly matters. In spiritual alchemy, inner silence is a sacred practice, not as a rigid obligation, but as a portal. It's not meant to escape reality, but to see it without the filters of a conditioned mind. When you fall silent, you begin to notice what's always been there, hidden beneath the noise. You begin to tell the difference between what comes from the soul and what comes from the ego, between what is truly yours and what was implanted. It's in silence that the inner alchemist awakens, because there is no transmutation without listening. The raw stone we are, full of noise, trauma, programming, only begins to be polished when we stop resisting and start listening. But listening to what? Listening to your breath, listening to your body, listening to the subtle field around you, listening to the spaces between your thoughts. It's in that space that the invisible begins to speak, and the most fascinating part is that the more you quiet yourself, the more you feel. You feel the vibration of words before anyone speaks. You feel the energy of a room before you see who's in it. You feel that something greater is guiding every move, even when logic can't understand it. And that feeling doesn't come from the outside. It comes from within. It's the language of the soul, and it can only be understood when you create space for it to express itself. Silence also brings up the voices you try to suppress, because in the beginning it's uncomfortable. It brings up everything you push down: fears, memories, discomforts. But that's how healing begins. Silence throws open the door to your mental prison. It shows you how deeply you've been conditioned to run from yourself. And when you resist this process, you keep feeding the noise. But when you move through the discomfort, something breaks. A new center forms. The ancient masters knew that silence wasn't a luxury. It was a spiritual necessity. It is the chamber where the alchemical gold begins to be forged, a space where the external world stops influencing your decisions and you begin to act from a wisdom that doesn't come from the mind. It's there that you hear the calling. It's there that you remember why you came here. And the most beautiful part is that deep down, you already know this place. You've been there in moments when life forced you to stop, in grief, in loss, in exhaustion that made you sit down and just breathe. Even without realizing it, in those moments you entered silence, and something inside you reorganized itself. That intelligence is alive, and it's waiting for you in the silence. Lesson 4. The Transcendence of the 8 Heavens. And it's at this point where silence becomes shelter that the soul finally begins to rise. Not like someone trying to escape Earth, but like someone awakening to subtler layers of their own existence. And this is where the ancient Hermetic masters spoke of the soul's true journey, the crossing of the 8 heavens. a symbolic ancient language but deeply real for anyone who starts to live from the inside out. These heavens aren't physical places in the sky. They don't have gates or angels with trumpets waiting above. They are states of consciousness, vibrational levels that every human being, sooner or later, is called to pass through, and no one takes you there. Not a guru, not a doctrine, not a ritual. It's you, with your clean soul and raw truth, climbing step by step through the spheres of your own inner universe. In the first heaven, the moon, the soul needs to let go of its emotional swings. The inner tides, the moods that shift with the wind, the out-of-control emotions that confuse intuition with neediness. The moon represents emotional instability, attachments to the past, repetitive cycles. Here, the challenge is to stabilize your energy, to find a center that doesn't depend on what others do or don't do. After crossing this first sphere, the traveler reaches the heaven of Mercury, the planet of intellect, reasoning, knowledge. But here, knowledge becomes a trap, because the soul can't rise carrying arrogant certainties, memorized theories, borrowed ideas. In this heaven, what needs to be released is the excess of logic, the need to control everything with the mind. It's the point where you start trusting feeling more than knowing. Next comes Venus, bringing up your deepest desires. But it's not about denying desire, it's about purifying it. The soul needs to transmute passion into devotion, the desire to possess into the ability to love without attachment. Many people get stuck here, because this heaven demands the detachment from everything that feeds the needy ego, relationships based on dependency, desires born from emptiness, pleasure that masks pain. Then comes the heaven of the sun, where everything that shines is put to the test. Here, spiritual pride, the vanity of thinking you've already awakened, the ego disguised as light, all of it needs to be burned away. This is the heaven that tests whether the light you shine is real or just a reflection of a constructed image. The soul must shine from essence, not from a need to be seen. The fifth heaven is Mars. Here come the inner conflicts. All the suppressed anger, old resentments, the resistance to forgive. Mars isn't just about war with the world. It's the inner war you've been fighting for years. The soul needs to lay down its weapons, stop fighting its own story, stop punishing itself for past mistakes. Only then is it possible to move on. In Jupiter, the sixth heaven, comes the test of greatness, not external greatness, titles, status, or power, but the kind that tries to hide the fear of being small. Here, the soul is invited to let go of control, of endless ambition, of the idea that it needs to achieve to feel worthy. The excess of wanting gives way to the wisdom of trust. And then comes Saturn, the heaven of hidden laws, the densest, the hardest. Here, everything you've postponed shows up. The karma, the responsibilities you haven't taken on, the consequences of past actions. Saturn demands maturity. It doesn't punish, but it reveals. It shows the invisible structure you've built throughout your life. And it asks, is what you're living created from fear or from awareness? Only after crossing these seven heavens does the soul reach the eighth sphere, a space with no form, no time, where all the previous layers collapse. Here, identity begins to dissolve. There are no more labels, no more memories, just a living, silent, vast presence. It's the point where the ego can no longer enter, where you no longer know who you are, but feel you've never been more yourself. And there, on the edge of this sacred abyss, there's a calling. An invitation to cross over, because beyond the eighth sphere, there's a final heaven. The ancients called it the ninth heaven. But this heaven cannot be described. It's not in time. It is the very center of everything. It's where the soul returns to what it always was, one with the source. There is no vision, no sound, just a state of being so complete that no word could ever explain it. Lesson 5. The triple nature of the human being. But not even the ninth heaven can be reached without first understanding your own makeup. And this is where almost everyone stumbles, because we grow up believing we are just a body, flesh, bone, name, ID number, profession. If anything, we're taught that we have a soul, like some invisible add-on that shows up when we die. But the ancients knew, the sages of Egypt, Greece, and India, Hermes, Plato, Pythagoras, they all spoke of the same truth. The human being is a living trinity, a tripod of existence made up of body, soul, and spirit. These three parts aren't symbolic. They are real dimensions, coexisting in distinct layers of human experience. The body is the most visible. Its matter, density, the instrument through which we live in the physical world. It's where we feel hunger, pleasure, pain, fatigue. But the body is not who you are. It's the vehicle, the temporary temple. It's like the clothing your consciousness wears to be able to operate on this plane. And like all clothes, it wears out, it ages, it dies. But what animates this body? What makes the heart beat? What sustains life even while you sleep? That no longer belongs to the realm of flesh. That's where the soul comes in. It's the bridge. The soul is emotion, memory, intuition. It's where your learnings live, your scars, your deepest desires, all that can't be explained by logic, but that you feel so strongly it hurts in your chest. The soul is what leads you through experiences, what's moved by a song, enchanted by a glance, broken by a loss. It is movement, transformation, story. But still, it's not the end. Because beyond the soul, there is the spirit. And the spirit doesn't move, doesn't suffer, doesn't feel emotion. It simply is. It is the eternal, unshakable, pure core. It's not bound by time or by the narratives of your life. The spirit is your divine spark, the flame of the all that lives silently within you. And that's why, when you start remembering who you are, it's not the soul that awakens. It's the spirit that reemerges. It has no voice, but it has presence. It doesn't judge, but it observes. It doesn't demand, but it sustains. The big problem is that we live fragmented. Most people live disconnected from that trinity. They take care of the body like it's all there is. Or they get lost in the soul, dragged by aimless emotions, desires that never satisfy. Others try to access the spirit by denying the body, rejecting the world, as if spirituality were abandonment. And so, the Trinity breaks. And where there's a break, there's suffering. True alchemy begins when you understand that none of these aspects can be left behind. The body needs to be honored, not as the end goal, but as a channel. The soul needs to be purified, not erased, because it's where experience happens. And the spirit needs to be recognized as the center, not to take you away from earth, but to remind you that even while living here, you've never stopped belonging to the infinite. That's the triple nature of the human being. And that's why, when you start living in balance between these three levels, something shifts. You feel the body without being a slave to it. You feel the soul without getting lost in it. And you hear the spirit without needing to run away from the world. You become whole, present, real. Lesson 6. Wisdom as medicine for the soul. And when those three aspects of being begin to align, something deep happens within you. It's like an inner space opens up. A space where everything can finally be understood, not with a rushed mind, but with the presence of someone who truly sees. And it's in this space that wisdom begins to descend, not as theory, not as more information to accumulate, but as medicine. Because there's a kind of pain that's not physical, that doesn't show up in exams, that no one sees. It's the pain of the soul. That emptiness that follows you even when everything seems fine. That feeling that something's missing, even surrounded by things. The soul gets sick when it disconnects from truth. And the only thing that can heal it is real wisdom. Not just wisdom from books, but the kind that comes from within, that touches, that awakens, that transforms. In the Hermetic tradition, the ancients knew that the soul's suffering comes from forgetting who we are, forgetting why we're here, forgetting the laws that govern this universe. When we forget, we fall into illusion. We start believing we are the body, that we are our thoughts, that we are what we have or don't have. And then the soul gets lost. It goes blind. It starts seeking relief in distractions, in shallow relationships, in temporary achievements. But that relief never lasts. That's where wisdom comes in as medicine. Because it's not here to entertain, it's here to set you free. It deprograms. It breaks the spells of the mental matrix. It shows that what seemed absolute was just a dirty lens. That fear wasn't truth. It was just a misinterpreted reflection. That attachment wasn't love. It was just disguised neediness. That pain wasn't punishment. It was just a reminder that you drifted away from your essence. Wisdom is like a light slowly entering the dark corners of consciousness. At first, it's uncomfortable, because it shows what you didn't want to see. Then it clears. It shows that there's another way to live. A lighter way, more aware, more connected to the truth that has always pulsed inside you. And the most beautiful part is that the more you allow that light in, the more your soul starts to reorganize. There is no true healing without this kind of wisdom, because the problem was never what you went through. It was how you understood what you went through. Pain isn't healed by escape, it's healed by meaning. And that's what wisdom does. It resignifies. It takes the broken pieces of your story and reveals that they were also part of the plan, that it wasn't for nothing, that it didn't break you, it cleansed you. And this knowledge isn't something external to you. It's already inside, waiting for you to access it. The ancients called it gnosis. The Hindus called it vidya. The Egyptians, ma'at. The name doesn't matter. It's the same force. It's truth vibrating in your core, waiting to be remembered. When you touch it, the soul breathes. Anxiety gives way. Fear dissolves. And in its place comes something rare these days, peace. The kind that doesn't depend on anything, that doesn't break easily because it's born from the encounter with what is eternal. Lesson 7. The art of inner transmutation. And when the soul begins to heal in the light of wisdom, it doesn't go back to what it was, because there's a moment when knowledge stops being just understanding and becomes transformation. That's where real alchemy begins. Not the one made with formulas and external elements, but the one that happens in the silence of your inner decisions. Transmutation isn't something you learn from a book. It's something you live and feel in your body and in your awareness. The art of inner transmutation is a process of refining your own nature, a journey where every pain, every crisis, every shadow that visits you stops being seen as an enemy and starts being used as fuel. In the Hermetic view, everything can be raw material for awakening as long as you know how to look with the right eyes. Anger is not a mistake. It's a raw force that can be refined into courage. Sadness is not weakness. It's a window to compassion. Fear, when not repressed, can become sharp intuition. Alchemy begins when you choose to stop running from the uncomfortable parts of yourself, because you realize that's exactly where the hidden gold is. To transmute is like stepping into an invisible lab within yourself. And in this lab, you're the scientist, the fire, and the metal to be purified. The fire, in this case, is your attention, your presence, your conscious decision not to be led by unconscious patterns. Every time you feel the impulse to act on impulse but choose to breathe instead, you're heating the dense metal. When you face an old wound without victimizing yourself, you're dissolving layers of weight that were holding you back. And that's not easy. Because it demands that you give up the pleasure of blaming the world. It asks you to stop repeating the old story that life is just like that. Transmutation begins when you look at everything that limits you and say, this doesn't define me anymore. In practice, it's in daily life that the alchemical process reveals itself. When you notice yourself anxious and, instead of running for distraction, you close your eyes and listen to yourself. When you feel anger and, instead of blowing up or shutting down, you investigate where it's coming from. When you're tempted to repeat old criticisms but choose to stay silent, not out of omission, but out of awareness. These are the small, powerful acts that take you from a raw state to an awakened one. But alchemy also requires patience, because to transmute isn't to erase, it's to integrate. It's not about getting rid of your emotions, but about giving them a new place inside of you. The alchemist doesn't deny his humanity. He purifies it. He feels everything, but no longer gets lost in what he feels. He lives in the world, but no longer gets contaminated by it. He suffers, but doesn't prolong the suffering with his mind, and that is freedom. The most classic symbol of alchemy is gold, but the real gold on this path isn't material. It's vibrational. It's the inner state of someone who's walked through the fire of their own shadow and came out the other side lighter, clearer, more whole. That gold doesn't shine on the outside, it radiates from within. You feel it in the person's presence, in the calm way they respond, in the gaze that embraces without judgment, in the strength that doesn't need to shout to be heard. It's a light that doesn't need a stage, but transforms any space it touches. And maybe the most surprising part is this: you already carry everything you need to transform. Nothing needs to be added, just revealed. Transmutation doesn't create something new. It reveals what's always been there, waiting for you to have the courage to walk through the pain and find your essence. Lesson 8: Knowledge as Light. And it's at this point, when the inner matter begins to shift, that a different kind of light starts to shine within you. It's not a physical light. It doesn't come from outside. It's not something you turn on. It's something that gets revealed. It's always been there, but it was buried under the rubble of ignorance. True knowledge, the kind that doesn't serve to inflate the ego, but to liberate the soul, starts to light up like a torch in the dark, and you feel it, because everything around you starts to make sense. The ancients called this knowledge gnosis, and they compared it to light, because when you're in the dark, everything feels threatening. Every shadow becomes a monster, every noise, a danger. But when the light turns on, you see what's always been there. Nothing's changed, but everything has, because now your eyes are open. And that's what esoteric knowledge does. It doesn't come to bring promises or ready-made answers. It comes to remove the veils, to illuminate what was once confusing, to dissolve the fear that came from not knowing. This light is different from ordinary information. It doesn't overwhelm, it frees. Because it doesn't speak to the intellect, it speaks to the soul. And when the soul hears the truth, it recognizes it. Even if the mind doesn't understand, something inside you just knows. It's like that idea, that insight, that symbol, activates an ancient memory. A memory of something you never read, but always somehow knew. That's why Hermetic knowledge was never meant for the masses, not because it's elitist, but because it only finds those who are ready, because the light it carries is so strong, it can blind those still clinging to the shadows. That's why in ancient texts, Teachings were passed down in layers, in symbols, in metaphors, so that each person would absorb what they were ready to see. Nothing was imposed, everything was revealed, and only after much preparation. Because when you touch a deep truth before you're ready, it can become a burden. But when you touch that same truth with inner maturity, it becomes a portal. This light also shows you where you're still asleep. It doesn't come just to comfort. Sometimes it makes you uncomfortable, because it shines on places you were avoiding. It reveals contradictions. It brings up lies you told yourself. But that's exactly where the power lives, because once you see, you can't unsee. Once the light touches something inside you, there's no going back to who you were. You might try, but something's already changed. The veil is down, and it's that light that guides the true spiritual path. Not the path that leads you to follow a master, but the one that brings you back to yourself. Because real esoteric knowledge doesn't belong to anyone, it's universal. And the deeper you dive into it, the more you realize everything is connected. The ancient myths, the stars in the sky, the synchronicities in your life, the words that give you chills. Everything starts speaking to you, because now the light is on, and with it comes discernment. You begin to see what's illusion and what's essence, what's manipulation and what's revelation, what's distraction and what's awakening. The light of knowledge isn't something you show off, it's something you become. It changes your presence, changes how you listen, changes the way you see others, no longer as threats or comparisons, but as reflections of something you also carry. This light teaches you to see with your heart, and that kind of vision, no one can take from you. Lesson 9. The importance of the initiatory death. But when the light of knowledge starts to shine within you, it inevitably reveals something most people try to avoid their whole lives: the need to die. Not physical death, but a far more challenging one: the death of everything you thought you were. The initiatory death, the point of no return. The moment when your constructed identity starts to fall apart, not because something outside destroyed it, but because inside you can no longer uphold the illusion. Initiatory death is silent. No one sees you going through it. There's no funeral, no declared mourning. But inside, everything feels like it's collapsing. The certainties, the old desires, the plans that no longer make sense. It's like you've spent years playing a role and suddenly realize it was just a character. And then the emptiness sets in. Because when the mask falls, the ego panics. It loses control. It tries to convince you that without it, you're nothing. But that's exactly where true rebirth begins. This process is sacred in every initiatory tradition. In ancient Egypt, priests underwent symbolic death rituals before taking on their spiritual roles. In Greece, the Eleusinian mysteries took initiates through their inner hell so they could be reborn with the eyes of the soul open. In esoteric Christianity, the crucifixion represents this exact moment, the death of the lower self to give birth to Christ consciousness. It doesn't matter the culture, the symbol is the same. Only the one who accepts death to the false can give birth to the true self. This death is the collapse of the structure that held your old world. It's when you realize that everything you thought defined you, job, status, image, other people's opinions, isn't what you are. And no matter how hard you try to hold on, there comes a moment when none of it fits anymore, because the soul has evolved, and the cocoon must break. It's painful, because the butterfly must completely destroy the form of the caterpillar. But that's the price of freedom. There's no way to be born new while still carrying the weight of the old. During this death, many people feel lost, because everything loses its taste. The things that once excited you now feel empty. The people around you no longer vibrate on the same frequency. You try to keep living a normal life, but you feel like something inside you has died, and no one noticed. But that's the sign you're on the path, because before rebirth comes the darkness. the darkness of the womb, the silence of the symbolic tomb. It's there, in that place where no one can go with you, that something powerful begins to take root, and there's no script, no shortcuts. You have to go through it, because this death isn't punishment, it's liberation. It comes to tear away everything that wasn't really you so that finally your true self can rise. And this new self doesn't wear masks, doesn't need to please to feel loved, doesn't sell itself for safety. It simply is. It doesn't search for truth. It lives truth because it was reborn from it. Analysis. The text develops the concept of initiatory death with depth and energy, maintaining the emotional and symbolic tone of the earlier sections. It avoids repetition, deepens real esoteric references, and presents the experience clearly without vulgarizing the theme. The narrative transition was natural, with no break in flow. Ready to move on to part 10. Shall I continue? Lesson 10. The power of the sacred word. And it's exactly in that rebirth, when the old dissolves and the new begins to emerge, that you realize the impact of everything you say, because it's in this renewed state of presence that you finally begin to understand the real power of the word. What used to be just sound now reveals itself as a creative vibration. Every word that leaves your mouth isn't just a set of letters, it's a vibrational spell, a code that alters subtle fields. And depending on how it's used, it can either elevate consciousness or trap it even further. Ancient traditions always knew this. The Egyptians called the word hika, verbal magic, used to invoke, to heal, to build. The Hebrews held the name of God as sacred, to the point of not even speaking it without deep reverence. Hinduism brought us mantras, which are words of power that, when repeated with intention and purity, reconfigure the mind and body's energy. And in Hermeticism, the word is a key, a living symbol that carries the vibration of the invisible world into the physical one. Because everything that exists began with a word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That's not just a biblical phrase, it's a metaphysical code. The Word is the creative vibration that organizes chaos. It's the sound that gives shape to the unseen. It's the bridge between idea and manifestation. And that force is in your tongue. With every sentence you say about yourself, about others, about life, you are sealing realities. You are declaring futures. You are invoking frequencies. But what happens when words are used without awareness? They become poison. Just look at how certain phrases stay with us forever. A criticism from childhood. A, "you're not good enough." A, "this is never going to work." Misused words settle into the body like wounds that never heal. They echo in the mind silently, shaping decisions, sabotaging paths, dimming the soul's light. And many times we don't even realize we're doing the same to others. Every time we speak out of impulse, out of anger, out of a need to be right. That's why words must be treated the way an alchemist treats their instruments, with reverence. When you speak with pure intention, your word becomes a bridge between dimensions. When you affirm something truthfully, you reorganize your vibrational field. When you choose silence instead of reacting harshly, you break a cycle of pain. And when you bless, you shift the frequency of everything around you. This isn't mysticism, it's vibrational physics applied to consciousness. The sacred word is the one that's born from a heart aligned with spirit. It doesn't have to be pretty, doesn't have to be complex. Sometimes it's just one word: yes, no, enough, sorry, thank you. But when it comes from essence, it cuts through illusion like a sword of light. Because the intention behind the word is what defines its power. It's not what you say, it's what you vibrate while saying it. That's why the same sentence, spoken by different mouths, can either heal or harm. It all depends on the vibrational purity of the one who speaks. And the most important thing to understand is that conscious use of words starts with self-talk. It's no use blessing others while cursing yourself inside. It doesn't help to wish light for the world if you treat yourself with judgment, if you call yourself stupid, incapable of failure. Every word you use toward yourself takes root in your emotional field, and those roots become behaviors, decisions, blocks. If you want to change your reality, start by changing the way you speak to yourself. Transform your narrative. Be reborn through your language too. Lesson 11. The hierarchy of beings. And it's when the word starts being used with awareness, as a bridge between worlds, that a new perception reveals itself. You begin to feel that you're not alone on this path, that there's an order, an invisible architecture holding everything together. And the more you awaken, the clearer that structure becomes. Nothing is random. Nothing is disconnected. There is a living hierarchy in the universe, not based on power or domination, but on vibration, consciousness, and spiritual function. The ancients knew this. In the Hermetic tradition, that hierarchy wasn't a chain of command, but a spiral of consciousness. Everything that exists has a place and a function within that spiral. From minerals vibrating in the density of matter to beings of light dwelling in subtle planes, all are part of a vast cosmic organism. Each level of that hierarchy expresses a quality of the source, an emanation of the all, with a different degree of clarity and responsibility. On the densest level are the material elements, stones, metals, plants, beings that sustain the foundation of life, stabilizing energy and anchoring existence. Above them, animals, who already carry instinct, movement, emotional connection. Then comes the human being, who represents the turning point, the first consciousness capable of choosing between lower and higher nature. The only one who can break patterns or perpetuate them. That's exactly why our position in this hierarchy is so delicate, because it carries freedom, and with freedom comes responsibility. Above the human level are the spiritual beings, consciousnesses that vibrate in higher dimensions and play specific roles in maintaining the balance of the cosmos. They are the guides, the masters, the living archetypes. In many traditions, they are called devas, angels, daemons, luminous egregores. The name doesn't matter. They all represent higher forms of intelligence that help guide the evolution of lower planes. They don't interfere directly. They guide, inspire, illuminate the path of those who are ready to see. Beyond them are the logos, creative intelligences that organize entire systems, galaxies, universal laws. And above all of this, there is no throne, no king of the heavens in a human sense. There is only the one, the formless origin, the source of all emanations. The consciousness that is in everything and sustains everything, not with a hierarchy of value, but with a hierarchy of vibrational function. Understanding this structure is not to feed pride or inferiority. It's to create alignment, because when you recognize where you are in this spiral, you stop resisting the process. You understand that everything that happens has a purpose within the greater flow. And more than that, you begin to realize that certain frequencies can only be accessed when you align with them from within. You can't ask for help from a spiritual master if you're still vibrating like someone who lives for chaos. The hierarchy of beings works like an energetic ladder. Each step requires a matching vibration, and that changes everything. Because instead of trying to control life, you start cooperating with it. You begin to listen more, to observe more, to respect the rhythms. You understand that the universe doesn't revolve around your personal desires, but that something much greater is orchestrating everything. And the more you harmonize with that intelligence, the more your own life falls into order. Lesson 12. The importance of intuition, and as you begin to align with this invisible order that sustains the universe, a new kind of perception arises within you. A way of knowing that doesn't go through logic, doesn't come from books, and can't be explained with arguments. It's a quiet sensation, yet so clear that it feels impossible to ignore. A certainty that comes even before thought. This is the territory of intuition, and the more you attune to the subtle realms, the more it shows up. Not as a gift, but as a natural faculty of the awakened soul. Intuition isn't magic, nor is it a privilege for a few. It's the original language of consciousness. What happened is that we were taught to ignore it. Since childhood, we've been programmed to only trust what can be proven, measured, explained. Anything that comes from feeling is dismissed as just your imagination. But the paradox is that intuition doesn't come from the mind. It comes from the silence behind the mind. It's like an internal antenna that picks up information from the invisible field and translates it into sensations, goosebumps, images, words that come out of nowhere, and even if they don't make rational sense, feel completely right in the heart. The ancients deeply valued this perception. The Greek oracles, the shamans, the Egyptian initiates all understood that the highest wisdom couldn't be taught, only remembered. And the key to that remembering was intuition, because it accesses a plane where time is not linear and truth doesn't need to be proven. It simply vibrates. It reveals itself to those who are present, receptive, clear enough to hear what isn't said aloud. On the spiritual path, ignoring your intuition is like trying to sail a dark ocean without a compass. It's your inner guide, the most direct channel between you and the divine. When something in you says, "Go this way," and everything outside says the opposite, but you choose to listen to that quiet voice, you activate forces that had been asleep. You enter a flow where answers come before the questions, where the right encounters appear effortlessly, where signs start repeating until you finally understand that you are not alone. But how do you cultivate that kind of listening? The answer lies in the quality of your presence. Intuition doesn't shout. It whispers. It doesn't invade. It invites. And to hear it, you need to lower the noise of the mind, clear the excess, silence the judgments. You need to accept that you don't have to understand everything with your head, that life is not a rational puzzle, but a dance between frequencies that the heart understands before language does. Intuition is the direct link to higher wisdom, not the wisdom from books, but the kind that pulses in the universal field, always accessible. It shows up in gut feelings that warn you, in dreams that insist on bringing a message, in coincidences that become synchronicities, in that decision you can't explain, but that later reveals itself as the best one you could have made. And the most beautiful part, the more you trust it, the stronger it becomes. Because intuition grows with use. And if you keep resisting, it goes quiet. But if you start honoring it, it shows you paths logic could never imagine. Lesson 13. The mystery of creation, and when you understand that you are co-creating reality at every moment, something inside you expands in a way that can't be undone. Because the mystery of creation is not just a beautiful spiritual concept, it's a real, active process happening all the time, even when you're not aware of it. You are creating right now, with what you feel, what you think, what you believe is possible or impossible. You are part of the universe's creative breath. And this is one of the most powerful and yet most overlooked truths. Creation doesn't begin in the physical. It doesn't start with action. Before anything becomes visible, it already existed in the form of vibration. Everything you see around you, your home, your body, your relationships, your external reality, is the final result of something that began backstage in the invisible. It's like a seed. You can't see what's happening underground, but the full potential is already there. The difference is that, in conscious creation, that seed is inside your mind, your emotion, your intention. And whatever you cultivate in that inner soil will eventually sprout in some form in your life. The ancients called this the law of cause and effect, or also the law of correspondence. What is inside manifests on the outside. What vibrates within you shapes the quality of what happens around you. And because of that, the true creator is not the one who attracts things, but the one who organizes their own internal field. You don't need to chase anything. You need to become what you wish to see manifested, because when you vibrate a true frequency, the entire universe responds, not as a reward, but as a natural reflection. Creation moves in spirals. It doesn't happen in a straight line. Sometimes what you put out today won't show up until months later, and if you're not paying attention, you'll think it's luck, coincidence, or fate. But it's not. It's just the return of something you already created with your presence, your intention, your energy field, and that requires responsibility. Because everything, absolutely everything, you nurture in secret will eventually show itself, whether it's hidden anger, contained love, or fear disguised as logic. That's why the mystery of creation requires awareness. It's not enough to want something if deep down you believe you don't deserve it. It doesn't help to repeat affirmations if your body is vibrating insecurity. True creation is about aligning every level of your being: thought, feeling, action, energy. It's living as if what you desire is already present, not pretending, but feeling, embodying, honoring each step as part of the path, not as an obstacle. And this is where the sacred comes in, because when you create in alignment with divine laws, you're not just fulfilling personal desires. You're collaborating with the expansion of creation itself. You become a channel through which the will of the all expresses itself. And that brings a kind of certainty no external achievement can offer. The certainty that you're exactly where you're meant to be, doing what you were born to do, not out of obligation, but out of connection, out of purpose, out of presence. Lesson 14, the purification of the senses. And as you begin to understand your role as a co-creator, you start to realize that the body, this seemingly physical and limited instrument, is also part of the sacred process. It's not an obstacle to spirit, it's a bridge. But like every bridge, it needs to be clean, strong, and well aligned so that the crossing is possible. And this is where one of the most forgotten principles of true spirituality comes in: the purification of the senses. Because there's no use seeking the subtle if your senses are still saturated with the dense. There's no use wanting to hear the divine if your ears are addicted to noise. There's no point searching for spiritual vision if your eyes are only absorbing images that disconnect you from yourself. The ancients knew this. In every wisdom tradition, revelation was preceded by preparation. And that preparation began with the body, with what you hear, with what you see, with what you touch, with what you breathe. Because all of it affects your sensory field, and your sensory field shapes your perception of the invisible. The five senses weren't made just to interact with the physical world. They are channels of perception that, when purified, become instruments to read the sacred. The problem is, most people live with these channels clogged, numbed, overstimulated. Sight is addicted to excess light, screens, visual distractions. Smell no longer recognizes the subtlety of natural fragrances. Taste has been hijacked by excesses that confuse pleasure with compulsion. Touch is used more for consumption than for connection. And hearing often doesn't even know what silence is anymore. And this has spiritual consequences. Because when your senses are polluted, your consciousness becomes reactive. You lose the ability to feel what's beyond, to perceive the vibration behind words, to pick up on the energy of a place or a person, to understand what your own body is trying to tell you. Spiritual sensitivity begins with physical sensitivity. If you don't honor what comes in through your senses, you close the doors to what the divine wants to reveal. The purification of the senses, however, isn't repression. It's not about withdrawing from the world or denying the body. It's choosing with awareness what you allow in. It's knowing that everything you consume becomes part of your field. It's slowing down, listening to the silence between words, feeling the texture of what you touch, tasting with presence, looking at something and seeing beyond the form, listening with an open heart, not just with your ears. That is true spiritual practice, bringing awareness to the senses until they stop being distractions and start becoming portals. With time, something starts to change. You begin to notice what you didn't see. You begin to hear what wasn't being said. You begin to feel the vibration of things more clearly. Life slows down without losing intensity, and in that refinement, your perception aligns with dimensions that once seemed out of reach. Because now, the senses that once pulled you outward have begun to lead you inward. Lesson 15. The Alchemy of Love. And when the senses become refined portals, when the body stops being noise and becomes a vessel for the sacred, a presence begins to emerge from within. Subtle at first, but increasingly intense. A force that doesn't need to be explained because it's felt. A vibration that silences conflict, dissolves rigidity, unites what once seemed separate. That force is love. But not the kind of love the world has learned to call love. Not the conditional, fragile, dependent love that wavers with expectations. What emerges here is alchemical love, the kind that transforms, that transmutes, that elevates. In Hermetic tradition, love isn't an emotion, it's a living substance, an invisible fire that connects all planes of existence. It is the link between what is above and what is below. The cohesive force of the universe, the universal solvent that dissolves the ego and reveals the spirit. It doesn't oppose reason, it transcends it. It doesn't deny suffering, it embraces it until it melts away. True love doesn't act as a reward, it acts like the sun. It shines because it's in its nature to shine, regardless of who's around. And it's exactly this love that drives the process of inner transmutation. Because only love can reach places logic can't. Only it has the power to melt pride, break down defense, heal guilt, liberate fear. Where love enters, illusion fades. It penetrates the densest layers of the soul with a tenderness so powerful that the human being finds themselves with no shield, no excuse, no escape, and for the first time, whole, stripped of masks, pure in essence. This love starts within, but it's not born from romance or perfect spiritual ideals. It's born when you stop rejecting parts of yourself, when you accept your light and your shadow with the same presence. When you embrace your mistakes, your emptiness, your wounds, and instead of fighting them, you wrap them in understanding. That's the exact moment when alchemy happens. Because love doesn't ask you to be perfect, it asks you to be present, to stop running from yourself. If you've made it this far, it's because something inside you has already started to wake up. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, you're feeling that a real path exists. A path that doesn't depend on the outside world or on ready-made answers, but one that's born from within, from the soul, from the spirit, from silence, from the memory of who you truly are. But this journey doesn't end here. It's only just beginning. And to help you dive even deeper into this process, a special video has been prepared. with revelations that will expand on everything you've learned today and help you apply these lessons in a practical, vibrational, and conscious way. So don't go just yet. Click now on the video that's appearing on your screen. That's where we'll meet again, on the next level of this journey. Because once the soul awakens, there's no going back to sleep. I'll see you on the other side.